Welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to be doing a progress walkthrough to get you up to speed on what's been done on Lunar 1 to date. Now after that, we're going to get into throwing on some rear suspension parts and get this thing one step closer to sitting on the ground. Let's get to it. So Lunar 1 is sitting on 35-inch Toyo tires. Also, we've coupled it up with some 17-inch methods. They're a negative 44 offset. Now, that gives us a pretty cool stance just on a stock truck, but this thing is gonna sit super wide because in the front, we have 5-inch over long travel suspension going on from Wicked Creations. In the back here, to add that extra width that we're gonna need, we went with an East Coast gear supply, 9.5-inch over rear axle. Now for the rear suspension, I went with Fox 16-inch coilovers. These are gonna mount up to a full roll cage. This roll cage is tied into the frame and is gonna help keep me and whatever passenger is crazy enough to ride with me safe. Now what ties into the frame is this 4-link that Wicked Creations and actually myself developed. So these lower control arms are from Wicked Creations. The upper control arms were fabricated in-house along with all of the mounts it takes to mount this thing up to the truck. All right, back here in the back of the truck, you can see the roll cage, but also underneath that is going to be a fuel system that's gonna help us deliver the amount of fuel we're gonna need to be able to run the 2JZ that's hiding in the engine bay. With this, we partnered with Fuel Lab to get the future of fuel delivery inside of Lunar 1. All right, now this thing's gonna have a ton of power. We're gonna get into that in just a minute, but when you have a ton of power, you need to make sure you can stop. Now there's a lot of different companies out there. There's Power Stop, there's, well, I don't know, just Google it. I'm sure you'll find a ton of them. But there is nobody that stops like Power Brake. Power Brake is the premier 4Runner, the premier Toyota product. I'm not sponsored by them, but I can tell you that it's this or it's nothing. Let's get this hood off and let's start talking about what lives inside the engine bay. In one of our previous videos, we did the removable core support. So this was built in-house, and this allows us to be able to easily remove the core support. I swear it's easy. To access the engine bay. Inside the engine bay is a Toyota 2JZ GTE. Now this isn't just any normal Toyota 2JZ GTE. This engine has been completely taken apart. The internals have been replaced with forged internals. The cylinder head has been ported and gone through by aluminum head rebuilders local to us here in the Pacific Northwest. Additional to that, we've added a larger Garrett turbo. We did away with the original twin turbo setup. Also, we've added all kinds of goodies in here from Rad Industries. Big shout out to Charlie at Aluminum Head Rebuilders and Dan Burkett at Rad Industries. I really appreciated their help and input when putting this engine together, and I can't wait to get this thing fired up and hear what it sounds like. And we're really not that far off. We just have a few more things to finish up inside of the engine bay before this thing is going to be the Baja trophy truck that we all know it's gonna be. But we have to wrap a few things up, get it over to Brian at Hartsock Motorsports, where he's going to do the engine harness and the chassis harness for us. And then hopefully from that point, it'll drive out of his shop. Before we get into working on the rear suspension of Lunar 1 and getting one step closer to putting it on the ground, let's talk a little bit about the interior and some things that we've done in there. All right, inside the truck, we have the racing seats from PRP. They are mounted up to the 4Runner off-road seat brackets and side mounts. These are gonna put us in a perfect position to be able to fab up the steering wheel mount, as well as finish up all of the pedals, install the shifter for the Samsonite transmission, and yeah, finish out the interior of the truck. I'm really excited about this part because this is when things start to come together and it really feels like it could be a drivable machine. Today, we are going to be cutting out some of the space in the rear for the rear coilovers, as well as adding some brackets to be able to hold the coilovers in. And this should be the point where we can finish weld some stuff on the rear and get this thing solidified so that it's just front suspension away from being a roller. All right, let's get into the rear suspension. So I've got it set up ready to tack in. Now, these plates here, these are plates that we made here in-house. These are designed to hold the coilovers as well as the bypasses that we're going to install. Currently, the coilovers, we have both of them in the car. We've got it already measured out, ready to go. Now it does look a little off when you're looking at the cage, but the measurements for each eyelet have been carefully measured to make sure that they're the same on either side. There is some variation in the cage. That just kind of happens. A lot of welding. Also, I haven't built a lot of cages. This one came out pretty good, but it is just a little off. So I'm gonna trim that up and make everything look nice and clean a little bit later. Right now, the most important thing is that these fit up and they're the same side to side. So let's get it tacked in, then pull the coilovers out, take the springs off, reinstall them, and then see if we can actuate the suspension. All right, now that that's tacked in there, we should be able to actuate the suspension. It's not super solid, so we don't want to do it with the springs on. We're gonna take the springs off. That way we can make sure we're not putting too much pressure on the tack welds and we don't break anything. Everything is sharp. All right, now that we got this thing out, let's get the springs off of it. Now, if you are pulling apart a coilover, especially if you didn't put it together yourself, it's always a good idea to put it on a spring compressor. I know that these are not under a lot of load because I assembled them myself, but if you didn't assemble the coilover or if you're not sure, make sure you use a spring compressor for safety. Always a good idea. So you can see there's no pressure on the springs. They freely move around. So now I feel comfortable to be able to pull off the bottom cap. Be careful with your fingers. You don't want to pinch them. Okay. You don't want to lose these. This is what holds the cap on the bottom. If we lose that, that's going to be a bad time. Now, when I go to final install these coilovers, this bottom shaft here isn't long enough to clear in the holes in the control arms. So I'm going to have to replace these. But for now, to fit it up, this will work just fine. All right, so we're gonna need to jack up the axle to be able to get that bottom bolt in. But we have mounts. All right, with the coilovers in, this is really exciting because this is about what we think ride height is gonna be for the truck. So with this, we still have a ton of room to go on our shocks, which means that this wheel is gonna have quite a bit more up travel. Pretty sure we're gonna have to cut and clearance some of the body. I'm excited to see what we can do with that. Maybe some wide body, but things are getting close, guys. This is really exciting and a huge next step. To wrap this up, I'm gonna show you what this thing looks like at full droop with the wheels on the ground and the coilovers in the car. I'd love to say that we could roll this thing out of here, but we still have a lot of work to do on the front. So make sure you guys like, subscribe, make sure you hit the notifications because this thing is coming together quickly and the next video is gonna be all about the front suspension. All right, guys, I'll see you next time.